This is the There Is Another Way podcast from spencerbruce.com. Making life work as a creative. Hi there, boys and girls, and welcome to my podcast entitled There Is Another Way, Making Life Work as a Creative. The idea behind this podcast is that I'm going to explore lots of different ways that we can make our work-life balance as a creative person work. Also exploring ideas of how to break away from the 9-to-5 existence. And most importantly, it's almost as a diary, so I will be very, very frank and honest about the problems incurred, successes, failures, and all the things along the way. I will also be interviewing a whole bunch of people in various episodes, other branches of creativity. I should actually introduce myself. My name is Neil Bruce. My website is spencerbruce.com if you want to check it out. I've had multiple careers and multiple jobs, and now, after many, many years, it took a long time to break away from the traditional career path, which, ultimately made me very, very unhappy, to pursuing my dreams, desires, and wishes. And I am very much on that journey. I've started the journey, so I thought it'd be a good prime time to start a podcast to detail some of the issues I encounter, some of the problems I have, but also some of the successes and some of the tips and tricks that you could employ to making it work for you. It's going to be largely big ideas that we'll talk about, but also probably, like I said before, being frank and honest, some of the problems, how we overcome the problems, and maybe some issues. Some of the episodes we'll talk about, tools of the trade, things that can make life easier. So it's going to be a whole gamut of different things, which ultimately all are focused towards making your life work as a creative person. Now, my background is in music. I'm a guitarist, I'm a sound designer, I'm a composer. I have also written a book. I have a PhD in soundscapes. Sound and acoustics is very much my world. But bizarrely as well, through a weird series of events, I ended up behind the lens of a camera because photography was my hobby outside of music production and guitaring. And I had many years as a filmmaker, producing over about 700 corporate films. And it's something I still dabble with, but again, that was a bit of a little bit of a side career to my main career, which I am pursuing very much as a musician, sound designer. I lecture currently as well. I give workshops, and I want to kind of discuss that in these podcasts as well, about some times that as a creative person that you need to have creative ways of making income, and you maybe don't always think of it as replacing your 9-to-5 job with another 9-to-5 job, except where you're the boss. That can potentially work for you if that's your idea and your dreams and wishes, but it isn't the only way. There are many, many ways of making it work, and I hope through this podcast and the people that I interview that we can discuss the variety of ways. Another thing I'd really like to encourage in this podcast is that you, the listener, can write in questions. I'm still setting up some of the back end of the podcast and where it's going to be hosted and all those kind of things. So ultimately, questions now, you can just email me directly at neil@spencerbruce.com. Spencer Bruce is all one word. And I'd love to answer some of your questions. If anything in here kind of strikes a chord with you, or if you've got any questions to me about how I did something, this is a free sharing enterprise here. I'm just really want to share my knowledge because I have a lot of friends who work the 9-to-5, but of course it's never 9-to-5, it's 9 till 11 or 10 and working late and weekends, and they're all really happy and they've all got these passions, but they can never really support your passion because you're worried about XYZ and paying the bills and the mortgage, and you've kind of got a little dream. But in a weird sense, society has is always saying follow your dreams and follow your passions, but actually no, you should conform to the 9-to-5, because you don't want to do anything that you might enjoy because who's going to pay your mortgage or who's going to pay your bills, and what if it all goes wrong? There's all this negativity, and I just want to be a little voice out there saying no, don't subscribe to the kind of evil corporate world that wants to crush you and only fulfill your dreams if your dreams are becoming middle management, maybe with the idea of being, some form of CEO in the future. That's the goal. But honestly, if that's your dream of being a CEO of some big corporation, perhaps this isn't the podcast for you. If your dreams and desires is to live your own life with your own rules, make enough money to be happy for you and your family and provide for your family, and also, satisfy your creative desires or your work desires, then, perhaps this is definitely the podcast for you. I'll probably state now that as we go through, there are probably going to be more music stroke sound stroke guitar focused, but don't let that put you off, because obviously that's my real area of expertise and current working, and so there will be references to that industry. But as I mentioned before, some of my background working in design and marketing, and as a filmmaker, I've got a real handle on how these tips and tricks are applicable to various creative industries. And to be honest, any job that you can do, you could probably, maybe talking about the guitar and guitar techniques and stuff like that, which we probably won't do in the podcast, aren't completely relevant if you're, say, an accountant or a software engineer. But even as a freelance software engineer, and you want to just, break away from working in that company, there'll be some ideas here which might help you to say, oh yeah, maybe I could apply that to myself, my way of working. The podcast is all about opening your mind, thinking about different ways of doing things, and believing that there is another way, because there always is another way. We've probably been press ganged into believing this kind of mentality from school and from jobs, that you should go to school, get a good education, go to university, get a degree, get a good job as a graduate training stream, stay there and just work there until you're 65, and you'll all be, safe and secure, and you'll paid your house off, and, blah, blah, blah. I don't subscribe to that. I kind of got caught up in all that, and, very early on realized that it made me ultimately unhappy. And through a variety of other books and podcasts and videos and people out there, come to realize that there is another way of doing it. Yeah, it's hard. It's harder. This is hard work. And I can't stress that enough about how much hard work this is. But it's worth it, because it's your life. You're putting hard work in. There's nothing worse, I've found, than, working hard for an employer only to find that, 6 months down the line, you're made redundant. You really believe in a company. You buy into all the hype about, how they care about you and, you're XYZ, but that's only to get you to do their bidding, because, at the end of the day, you're expandable. And a lot of people don't really consider this. They think they got a job, they're safe. One day, bam, they're out. And then what? So why put all this effort into impressing a boss who, ultimately is just guided by figures and, the lowdown on the turnover of the company, to being your own boss, or being a boss with, a collective of your friends or people you work really well with? You form your boss. And then if you're working till 11 o'clock at night, you're working for you and your family. You're not working for someone else. So all the returns, you reap those rewards yourself. We've talked about, how this is primarily geared towards being a creative, and also we should also add on top of that being a creative is also really, really hard. It's if you're a musician, if you're an artist, if you're a photographer, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a graphic designer, if you're a copywriter, a lot of these are, in a sense, soft skills. People really don't know the value of them, or don't really appreciate the value of them, because, if they did, there'd be none of these gig, do this for exposure, do this for nothing, it'll be great exposure. When do you ever go into a restaurant and say, you know what, I'd like to sample all your dishes because I go to other restaurants, and if I like your dishes, I'll come back here and actually pay you for them, or I'll tell all my friends and they'll come. They'll just tell you to get lost, or worse. And I'm going to try to refrain from swearing on this podcast, but maybe one or two will slip in occasionally. So exposure, this whole thing, do so. We don't really know what a band is worth. And that's something I find, because, if you're in a band like I am, people kind of like balk at the price. It's like, wow, that's a lot. But, my uncle or my son plays in a band. Why can't we? And they'll do it for free. Well, that's cool. They might be a brilliant band. They might not. But there's no way of telling until after the event. And then everyone goes, oh my God, they were, good luck to them. They were a nice bunch of young lads, but they couldn't play. It was terrible. Or they didn't turn up on time. Or there's many aspects that what you're paying for when you're paying for good creative work. But a lot of people don't know how to value this. And this is, again, another episode further down the line that I will talk about this. So being a creative, you are up against it. And the other downside of being a creative is sometimes knowing how to price yourself, knowing how to price your work. This is something that comes with experience and also confidence. And if you start to approach your creative business as a business, then some of these issues will go away. And having said a few minutes ago about how this is breaking away from the evil corporate world and blah, 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 all that stuff that I'll probably get on my high horse about quite a bit, I would say that the biggest tip of all I can give you after saying all that is that if you're going to do this, you've got to think of your output as a business. You've got to think of you as a business, but a business of one perhaps, or two if you've got a few other friends involved. And this is something I will bring up in another podcast about branding yourself, and thinking bigger and treating everything like you would in a business will enable you to perhaps develop faster. And also, you may have several businesses. You might have 3 or 4 little businesses each, which draw in little amounts of money every month, and all of those contribute to one big amount of money. And this is something which, again, I think is overlooked when some people are considering doing something for themselves, because the idea being that, I've just got to do one thing. I'm replacing my 9-to-5 job with photography, and I can only do photography because I want to be a photographer. Yeah, that can work. That can certainly work. But perhaps you need to think, well, if I'm a photographer, that's great. I can do my photography. But actually, in my 9-to-5 existence, I also did bookkeeping. I was a real whiz with Excel. You could, perhaps start another little Excel business for people who don't, or you might be able to fix televisions. You could have half a business where you fix people's computers or televisions, and the other half doing your photography. And that you get 2 smaller buckets of cash, but when you add them together, they might add up to your total bucket of cash that you're doing it, until maybe one or the photography which you want to pursue overtakes. So yes, I'm going to kind of wrap up here on the first inaugural There Is Another Way podcast. I'd love to hear your questions and thoughts. Please email me at neil@spencerbruce.com, and I will try and answer some of your questions in the upcoming podcasts. Again, I see this as almost a collaborative podcast, because I want to help you guys out there and inform you from my experience, because I'm going through this as much as maybe some of you are, or some of you are considering it. So as I said, this is going to be a warts and all kind of podcast. I'm sure some of them aren't going to be that upbeat when things go wrong, but I want to talk about it. So, I can get your feedback on things that have gone wrong for you and how you overcome them. And hopefully when things go wrong for me, I can also discuss, how we got out of it and how we bring ourselves up. Because if we all help each other out, we can all make this happen, and we can all find that there is another way. So I'm going to sign out now. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope to hear from you soon.